How many of you know a book called It Can't Happen Here? Okay. You don't mind, since you know about the book, if I quote from it. But I'll tell you the rest of it. It Can't Happen Here is a novel written by the great novelist Sinclair Lewis, who was not known for writing political novels per se. No, he wrote about Middle America, Babbitt and Dodsworth, but he wrote one book in the early 1930s called It Can't Happen Here, because he was responding to the fact that fascism was growing in Europe, in Italy and in Germany. And people said, oh, that's Italy, Germany, but this is the United States. It can't happen here. And so he wrote a book called It Can't Happen Here. And the book was about how fascism comes to the United States in its own American way. And he says about the man who becomes president, quote, vulgar, almost illiterate, a public liar easily detected, and in his ideas almost idiotic, while his celebrated piety was that of a traveling salesman for church furniture, and his yet more celebrated humor the sly cynicism of a country store. He uses that useful patriotism which always appears upon threat of an outside attack. And in fact, the president created some incidents on the Mexican border in this novel so that the United States could go to war against Mexico. Well, anyway, I guess, what am I saying to you? That we have a lot to do. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of history to learn. We have a lot of history to impart to other people who have not learned their history and therefore have not been led to examine very closely what is happening now and to examine it in historical perspective. And it's comforting to know we don't have to do it all ourselves because, as I said, even despite the media and the government, now 2/3 of the American people are opposed to the war because there's a way in which, and the reason for this, despite the media, is that there's a way that truth makes its way through the apertures of even a closed society. That the truth has a power which is greater than the propaganda of the people who control the media. And these truths begin to come out, just as they did during the war in Vietnam. During the war in Vietnam, there was the government propaganda. The media in Vietnam were almost up to the end in support of the war, but the facts, information began coming through, images of a young Vietnamese girl running on a road in Vietnam with her skin shredded from napalm, images of Vietnamese women and children huddled in the trenches while American GIs poured rifle fire into them, the My Lai massacre. These, even though these were just bits of information that began to come through, the American public became more and more disenchanted with the Vietnam War to the point where finally the government could not carry on the war. And so this is a process which is going on, and it's comforting to know that we don't have to do everything because there's a reality that comes through. But we do have to do something. We have to help progress and change along. We have to do what social movements throughout history have done when something positive has been accomplished. We have to persist. And we have to organize. We have to agitate. We have to inform. We have to get together with other people. We have to speak up when we're not supposed to speak up. In other words, we have to become part of a movement and never to be discouraged by the fact that you think you're very small. You think you're pitiful. You go out on a picket line and there are only 7 people there. But you go out on the picket line, there's 7 people there and there are 4 policemen. You wonder why. Because they know something that you don't know. They know the small movements grow into big ones. And that's how change has taken place in this country. Small clusters of working people who first lost their jobs but finally organized and went out on strike, and they then could defeat General Motors and the Ford Company because ultimately the people in power need us. The corporations need the workers to do their bidding. If the workers stop doing their bidding, the corporations are helpless. If people stop buying their products, and this was learned when farm workers out on the West Coast boycotted grapes, when people stop buying their products and boycott them, then the greatest economic conglomerates become helpless in the face of this. In other words, people do have a power which doesn't appear at first, but which comes out of the activities of huge numbers of people who gather in very small numbers, and at certain critical points in history, these little groups and individuals that are saying something and doing something that reach a critical point, and then you have a social movement. And then the South erupts with black rebellion against the situation of racial segregation. And then you have a nationwide movement against the war. And then you have a women's movement, which brings the situation of women to the attention of the public without any constitutional amendment, without any initiative of Congress and the president. And these movements, gay, lesbian movements, movements of the disabled, they all appear powerless at first. But when people join them, and they get together, and they persist, and they don't give up, they don't lose hope, at certain points in history, things change. And we're at a point in history when things need to change, and we can play a part in that. Thank you.